welcome everyone to our World Workplace Wellbeing Online Summit. Since its inception, the Global Wellness Institute has promoted wellness across a variety of industries, supplying evidence-based wellness resources across the globe for more than 20 years. The World Workplace Wellbeing Summit has gathered the finest thought leaders and influencers, broadening the Global Wellness Institute's deep reach into the topic of workplace well-being. Through deep insights and engaging expert discussions, the summit promises to expand your toolbox for making and implementing decisions to positively impact your business and the world at large. Please welcome our experts today, Sally Wolf and Danielle Farage, for today's session on the importance of belonging at work. Some quick intros here. Sally Joy Wolf is a well-being advisor, patient advocate, and keynote speaker who empowers and inspires others to flourish. Her work integrates her studies at Harvard and Stanford, her certifications in positive psychology, coaching, resilience, and meditation, and her lived experience with metastatic breast cancer. From fun corporate workshops to meaningful panel conversations to inspiring keynotes, she integrates themes such as meaning and purpose, post-traumatic growth, and authentic and vulnerable leadership. Earlier in her career, Sally spent 2 decades as a media executive. At Time Warner, she led multicultural business strategy across HBO, Turner, and Warner Brothers, and created and launched 150, a content incubator for innovative, diverse storytellers. A former camp counselor, Sally still passionately brings childlike wonder, creativity, and community into everything she does. Danielle is a Gen Z speaker, expert, and talent strategist on a mission to bridge gaps between generations and help us work better together. As a top 10 future of work influencer and digital nomad, Danielle has had firsthand experience living the future of work. While her experience helping organizations navigate challenges posed by the pandemic, widening skill gap, and mental health epidemic have been mostly focused on the technology industry, her workshops on effective communication with Gen Z and fostering friendship, as well as her consulting practice, are found useful to enhance ways of conscious thinking and relationship building between generations across industries. Sally and Danielle, take it away.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, for the warm introductions, and John for the invitation for me and for Danielle to be here. We are so happy to be with everyone who's here live, and also happy for anyone who's watching the replays. We will put all of our contact info in at the end. But for now, what we are going to do to kick it off, belonging means different things to different people. So while I'm starting to do the intro, maybe just type into the chat for those of you who are here, if you're able, what belonging means to you. Something brought you here today, right? Something led you to log into this session. So what is it about belonging? Belonging means this to me, or I was interested in being here because that will really help me and Danielle tailor what we do as we chat. And at the highest level, belonging to me is all about the feeling of being accepted, of being embraced with someone else or with a group if we're talking about work. And so Sylvia gave so much of my background. What I will say is my sentence, overeducated, former media executive, had a twist and turn in my life, which was a series of cancer diagnoses that led me to go really deep into positive psychology. And the combination of learning about human flourishing, along with a decade worth of dance classes before cancer, led me to really get to know myself, my mind, my body, and really tune into the feeling of belonging in that intuitive way of really getting to know myself, of where I felt comfortable, of the people with whom I felt comfortable. And Danielle and I first met through LinkedIn. We are both rather prolific on there. So if we're not yet connected with any of you, please take a look. But Danielle and I met almost exactly a year ago. In fact, Danielle, it's almost a year to the day. It was this week when we were at LinkedIn, and I had been following Danielle for a bit, and she is this guru on all things Gen Z, and really posted about things in a way where I felt an immediate connection. And so when I heard her speak in that room and she introduced herself, I immediately sought her and said, like, I would love to get to know you better. I think we're doing things that are adjacent to one another. And when John reached out to me to chat today, I participated last year in this marathon. I said, here's an idea, and I would love to do it with Danielle Farage. So I'm going to let her introduce herself, and then we'll talk to you a little bit together about belonging and how we've found that in our friendship, trademark to Danielle for that word, and how we think about it in a broader sense in the work that we each do separately and when we have a chance collaboratively. So my Gen Z buddy, Danielle.
That was so beautifully said. Thank you, Sally. And thanks for bringing me on this very fun marathon with you. So I'm Danielle. I'm born and raised in New York City, went to school at USC, graduated with a degree in psychology, minored in entrepreneurship. No surprise. All my my family members are all entrepreneurs. So that is the path that I ended up taking. And a lot of my work, as mentioned before by Sylvia, lies in the intergenerational dynamics at work and how they impact us, just not just at work, but also beyond work. I think that belonging from a very early age to me felt unattainable. Yet I grew up in a very close-knit Jewish community. And that like is, you grow up with a sense of belonging that you don't necessarily realize you have. But within my own family, I felt very alone. And it wasn't until much later on when, I started, maturing and really getting my own friends that I realized that I could create belonging in my friendships. And that's ultimately, like I say to this day, like my friends, because I didn't feel like I had belonging in my family, I sought that out in my friendships. And I think I still do that to this day. And I think to Sally's point, before about how we met, I'm always curious and I'm always looking to grow new friendships and new friendships with other people. And I hit a certain point a few years ago, and we can get into it a little bit more about what it means and so on. But I hit a certain point where I was creating these relationships with people who were typically older than me, who had a lot of life experience because I know I have so much to learn. And I didn't have a way to describe those friendships. And that's sort of where friendship was born, where it's this mutually authentic, beneficial, and vulnerable relationship between two people of any age, where there's no power dynamic and where the focus really is the 3 L's. What can I learn? What can I leave? And what can I leverage? And that's the story of friendship. And I've now turned that more into workshops and programs for organizations. But I'm very excited to be able to talk about, belonging and such a great topic today.
Love that. And what I did, Danielle, while you were sharing your own intro, I just glanced at what everyone already contributed to the chat. So I'm just going to read them because there's such a nice thread and everyone has their own words that they use to describe belonging and they all connect. So belonging means a sense of connection with others, knowing you are where you are meant to be. So that sense of like that meant to be-ness that Danielle and I both love the word bashert, which is the Jewish word for that. Feeling a part of a community, supported, seen and valued, mutual respect, being in community with others and feeling safe and accepted. So there are these threads of acceptance, of being fully seen, fully understood, fully allowed to be your full self, the respect piece, that you belong, you're meant to be there, and that connection with others. And so you hopefully all, just from what you all already contributed, can see why when this idea of belonging came up, I was like, Danielle needs to be here because friendship is her term. And I also love that it's something that we've come to share with one another. And hopefully that all of you by the end of this can identify some of those moments in your own life outside of this Zoom, right? Or the people that I have the most belonging with? What is it about those relationships that feels so fulfilling? And how can I have more of that? And one thing I want to hit on, we're not going to talk exclusively about work. Both Danielle and I, and Danielle, I don't want to speak for you, but in our conversations, I know we are the type of people who we try to bring our full selves to work and be our full selves everywhere we go. So it's like there is a work self, but I know I can speak for myself, and Danielle is nodding. And I just know this about, like, we were at a conference together this year. We spent a lot of time together. Our aspiration is that we belong at work, that you belong at work, because you can be your full self there. So it's not that you're fitting in at work because you're being a certain way at work, and that separately you're doing that in the rest of your life. It's how can I be more aligned with myself, more consistent with myself? Kind of, I talk a lot about light. So how can I light up from the inside more is a question, or how can you light up? Like, what would light you up more from the inside out is something I ask clients all the time, and being able to access that at work. So I can tell you that there is a lot of data, and I'm not going to hit you over the head with it. I will give you the link to an HBR article, but at the highest level, when we can foster a sense of belonging at work, I'll give you a tiny bit of data because I'm a former management consultant. So there's always like a little data that I have to share, but just a little, no PowerPoint slides. When we belong at work, when we as companies foster belonging at work, there is much lower turnover, much higher tenure, job performance increases 56%. And I should have said turnover goes down 50%, 75% reduction in sick days. So if you were to do the math in a big size, medium sized company, 10,000 people, that's $52 million in savings per year. So this isn't just a nice to do to foster belonging within teams because it helps people to feel good or smile more or maybe hug more if it's that kind of a culture. Like, yes, that is all true. But at the end of the day, it's win-win. It's a win for the company and a win for each person. And together, that helps everyone move forward in a way that fosters more belonging. And Danielle, thank you for being my friend, and putting the data in the chat. So this is all about work, and also not at all about work in so much as it's all about being able to show up as your full self everywhere. And Danielle and I come at this in two different ways. I came to this work after 20 years in the corporate world. I was an executive at NBC Universal, at Time Warner, spent most of my time in the media industry. Before that, had degrees from Harvard and Stanford, studied psychology undergrad, have an MBA and a master's in education from Stanford. And it wasn't until I studied positive psychology and really got clear on things like belonging and meaning and purpose that I really kind of understood what had been sort of not nagging, that's the wrong word, but been things that I had been noticing about the corporate world throughout. Like, why aren't people honoring this thing that this person said? Or why is that person over there and no one's noticing? And so I pivoted my career. I didn't really share this in the intro, but on the heels of all of my cancer diagnoses, to really go deep on positive psychology in the workplace. So I work with corporate clients and help individuals and teams to flourish. And the lens that I kind of bring initially, the lens that led me into this, was returning to the corporate world with a chronic illness. So even before the pandemic, I was and still am immunocompromised. I live with a stage 4 cancer. I knock a lot of wood because I have meds that are working, and I am immensely grateful for that. And at the same time, I navigate a lot more doctor's appointments than most people do. I had unexpected surgery last year, not on my breast, but on my leg, even though it was breast. So like you can kind of go down the list, and I'm constantly immunocompromised. So the session I did last year as part of this marathon, which is on the GWI website, was all about working with cancer. And so that's my lens. So I think a lot about belonging in the spirit of anything that is invisible, And I'm not going to invite, I don't know how well everyone on here knows each other. A lot of you may be logging in for the first or second time. So I don't want to ask anyone to be more vulnerable than they're comfortable being, but maybe just write yes if in the chat without needing to share more, if that resonates. Like you bring in something to the workplace or into a meeting that someone else that's invisible to others. So for me, it's that my immune system is compromised. And when I hear people coughing or sneezing or wanting to shake my hand, I'm a hugger, but I'm not a handshaker because it makes me anxious. So, and I'm seeing Mira, thank you for nodding. I always look for a nodder in any Zoom, any workshop I do, because otherwise I'm not sure if I'm making any sense. But the one nodder is amazing. So Mira, thank you. You made my day. And so maybe a yes in the chat or a thumbs up emoji reaction if you are bringing something invisible into the workplace. And I'm going to turn it over to Danielle to talk about the generational lens that she brings in terms of belonging. And thank you, Jennifer, for the thumbs up. But that's really what led me, and Carolyn, to you too, thank you, led me to start to think about the belonging, am I able to be here as my full self? DEIB. So I don't know if everyone knows this, but B, belonging, was added to DEI because it is an important pillar. Can I show up as my full self and truly be accepted, to use the word that someone else used in the chat earlier, to be me? So can I come as myself, my immunocompromised self, and say, hey, I'm so grateful to be here. Also, I'm not comfortable in this small conference room unless we open the door because the space feels too tight for me. Or I would prefer to sit a little bit farther away. It has, whatever it may be, depending upon the day, depending upon what I know about myself and my health. And Danielle, I want to turn it over to you because I know that some of what I shared about health resonates with you, but also really the generational lens.
Yeah. Yeah. So first off, I just want to say, adding to your point, I'm someone who has a sister, a best friend, and a friend tour who are all immunocompromised and have invisible illnesses. And what they are isn't really important, but like all we need to know is that they critically impact people's lives and really shape them. And so having that experience of living, with a sister, a best friend, and a friend tour, all who have similar situations, it makes me hyper aware to their circumstances, and it makes me a better friend, makes me a better friend tour, makes me a better sister. And I'm like very grateful, that is, a thing in my life. But not everyone has that experience. And so it's really interesting just to, I think, and it's critical for all of us to hear like your story, Sally, because even when we're together and we're hanging out, there's certain things that you say that I don't necessarily think about. And then finally, when you say it, it's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense for you to wear a mask, or it makes a lot of sense, for us to do things a certain way. And I'm fine with that. But it takes you the courage to share it. So just to call that out. The second thing is, so yeah, I look at this from a different angle. My long story short of how I got into this work is I graduated into the pandemic, and I had an internship. I was working full time, now remotely, when it was once hybrid. And I was working for a woman who really ended up being, a super toxic boss. I'm talking about having me work LA hours when I was in New York. So I'd work 12 to 8 p.m. and I wouldn't really have a life. She'd text me all the time on the weekends, at night. It really didn't matter. Every single day after our morning meetings, she would say, hey, Danielle, can you stay on for a little bit? And then would berate me and tell me all the things I'd done wrong the day before. So like very toxic. She also told me I was entitled because of the school I went to, which is like kind of ridiculous. So anyway, I was this, 21-year-old girl who had just graduated, thought that I was going down this marketing path and like maybe that was the right one for me. And I was just being told that all my skills were useless. And it really took me a lot of strength. But in August of 2020, I left that job. So I left after 8 months, and 3 to 4 of those being really toxic. And I got a job 3 weeks later at a great startup, remote work. Because of the pandemic, they had an office in New York City. It was about 18 people, and it was truly, to this day, still the best working environment I've ever been in. And the juxtaposition of those two experiences is really the thing that made me realize, wow, culture really matters. Belonging really matters. And when I thought back to, wow, what was one of those key differences between those two experiences? It was my first day onboarding to that second amazing job. Their second slide was, we value diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And it's built into our products, it's built into our company culture. And not only that they did it and they said it to me the first day, but that they really followed through with action and everything that they did. And so that was sort of when I realized, wow, like, this is important. Not enough people are talking about this, especially from a younger perspective, where it's like, no one tells you what's right or wrong behavior when you're right out of school. And so I started, as I was doing my work, it was in the HR tech sector, I started to really curate conferences and these experiences for HR leaders where we were talking about belonging at work. We were talking about AI and HR and the key trends in the year to come. And I was like, wow, like, the younger perspective is sorely missed here. If we're talking about reimagining work, why are we not really including everyone at the table and giving everyone a seat at the table? And so that was sort of where my work began, of bringing this Gen Z perspective, not only to conversations about the future of work, but also the now of work, right? How are we treating each other? How are we listening to each other? How are we viewing each other's generation? How are we, what are the biases that we're holding that we don't necessarily think are impacting our behaviors, but really are? But also, most importantly, where are the opportunities for us to coexist and to leverage each other's strengths, and rather than focusing on the weaknesses, to really succeed and thrive together? And so a lot of my work lies in those themes of, whether it's a keynote where I'm talking about Gen Z and dispelling myths and helping HR leaders better understand this generation of workers and how they could talk to us to better engage, retain, and attract us. Or I'm talking to young professionals about, confidence, putting yourself out there, the importance of believing that you can have an impact at an organization, and grabbing, the bull by the horns and not being afraid to step up and be that leader. That's a huge part of where this new generation really needs help and support. So my work really lies in closing that gap. And yeah, belonging is a huge part of that.
Well, and I just want to underscore, bold, italicize, put in, highlight something that you just said, because the one hand, Danielle, as you voice what you see on behalf of your generation of Gen Z, you are sharing like some of the expectations and the needs. And also, I would say, by having those conversations, Gen Z is also leading the way in really the change that we are seeing in this evolution of work. I'm Gen X. When I would try to introduce some of these conversations, and I can tell you, I won't bore you with random stories from over the decades, but it was almost like ahead of its time, right? Like, people weren't really wanting to have those conversations. Belonging wasn't all inclusive. I vividly remember being at my management consulting firm, chit-chatting, I was friends with everyone. I mean, when I left, there were like 150 people in my goodbye email on top of the 100 handwritten thank you notes that I wrote. But in that email, I alphabetized everyone. And I loved this. The janitor ended up first because his last name started with an A. And I know the partners were like, because every other email was usually hierarchical. Partners went first, and, you know, senior, then junior partners, then the principals, and so forth. And I just decided everyone was equal. And I'll tell a quick story about a janitor that I met last year who really, really, one second, let me put, because people are hopping, I'll just put our LinkedIn for Anita and anyone else. So at any rate, so I think Gen Z is really leading the way. And part of that is Gen Z, I believe, and Danielle, like, tell me if I'm not correct on this. These have been parts of your conversations, you know, being in school during COVID, for example. But before that, even just like there's been more focus, not in every classroom, but social emotional learning was actually a thing for you growing up, at least a little bit. I majored in psychology at Harvard, and not once did I hear anything about meaning, purpose, getting to know myself, growth mindset, any of those, right? So that's, you know, I'm what, like about 20 years ahead of you, so to speak, not in our friendship, but in terms of where I, you know, when I graduated, there's been a big shift there. And the story I want to share about, so I really see Gen Z as actually being the leader in the workplace in this, from my perspective. And one story I can share. So last June, pretty much exactly a year ago, I had surgery on my leg. I'm bionic. I had a titanium rod and some screws put into my femur. And I chose the hospital. I live in New York City, like Danielle does, and HSS is a top surgical hospital here. So I left Cancerland. I went to HSS, chose it, crowdsourced it on Facebook, got a recommendation, had the best surgeon. That is why I chose that hospital. But the story that I share most about my experience at HSS has nothing to do with that surgeon and everything to do with a janitor named Francis, who came into my room, and I posted about him on LinkedIn, so I can find the post and give the link. But with what I'm about to share, he came into my room, he greeted me by name. So first of all, he took the time to look at which patient was in which room and actually knew my name. Beyond that, we started chatting. He had this amazing light about him. And a nurse noticed our connection and said, "Have you heard Francis sing?" She asked me. And I said, "No." I said, "Francis, what's your favorite song?" And so he said, "Smile." And so I asked if he would sing for me and if it was okay for me to record, which is what I put on LinkedIn. If anyone knows anyone at like America's Got Talent or The Voice, I really want to make this guy famous. But at any rate, I posted it on LinkedIn. And when I posted not only the video, but wrote about Francis and the connection, the CEO of the hospital commented, who I did not know. So somehow he miraculously saw the post. But what he wrote was, "Francis sang to me too. It was so beautiful." Someone else commented, "I worked at HSS. I left 5 years ago. Francis still texts me every day to see how I'm doing." And the comments went on. There were so many from colleagues of his. But the point of this story is not simply about Francis. It's about the fact that Francis felt that sense of belonging, of connection, of empowerment at his job, that he is a piece of the patient's healing, that he is able to sing and to connect and to be a part of the healing journey in his way, which is very different from the surgeon and the nurses. And I will tell you the opposite side of that, which is some attending physician, who shall remain nameless, walked in while Francis and I were chatting, and she started talking to me. Not even an "excuse me," not even a "oh, I see you're chatting, I'm in a," nothing. Just dismissed the conversation I was having, I'm almost certain, because he was a janitor and she was a doctor. That's the opposite of inspiring belonging. Now, Francis wasn't fazed by it. It might happen to him a lot. I hope it doesn't. But the point is we all have had moments, I am sure, where we have been that doctor. I'm sure I've done it because I've been rushed because I needed something. But we all have the choice, now that we are more aware of belonging, to actually say when I walk into a room, am I doing my best to help everyone here to shine, to help everyone here to feel fully included and empowered in their job, in their skill set? And the last thing I'll say on this is there actually has been a study done on janitors at hospitals, not on Francis, but on janitors at hospitals. And a psychologist about 20 years ago saw a really big difference where some janitors felt deep meaning in their deep purpose, I should say, in their jobs, and others didn't. So she probed it. She asked the janitors who felt no purpose, what do you do? They all said they cleaned floors. The other janitors who felt deep purpose, they also cleaned floors. What they did day to day was the same in terms of what was on their skill set, the resume. They cleaned floors too. But when she asked them, what do you do? Their answers were wildly different. Their answers were, we help patients to heal. We help patients to get well. Same job description, completely different interpretation. You want to know what belonging gets someone? That is the best example I can give you. And I see Danielle unmuted. Perfect time, passing the baton.
That was so beautiful, and just like the perfect illustration of belonging, both in the it exists and it doesn't exist. Like, truly, that was beautiful. I'll say too, like your point about Gen Z, this being a part of what we grew up with, and I put this in the chat, it's a huge shift. I literally took a mindfulness course at LinkedIn as part of my major. It's look at the movies that are out, look at, Inside Out 2 is even more emotionally complex than Inside Out 1. And that is, it's like literally talking about, it's having people have a conversation about the self and, oh, okay, how is my self feeling? What is my full self? And it's like the main character goes on the mission of finding their full self. And it's these are not things that we grew up talking about. It's certainly not things that we grew up in the workplace talking about. And so bringing it back to this like generational example, right? That doctor that went into the room and just started talking might have grown up in a system where belonging wasn't really discussed, where it was hierarchical. But in today's working world, it is very much a part of what we talk about and what we focus on. And what's so important to think about is the people that are coming into the workplace now. That is what we know, right? Majority of Gen Zers, I think it's somewhere around 90%, 85%, would only work for a company that values DEIB, would only work for a company that truly, like at least puts it on their website, right? But the definition of which, how it shows up, how it's communicated throughout the process of recruitment and onboarding, and then once they're there, is getting more and more specific. And it's more and more important because this generation of workers is the most diverse in history. And so not only is it a good thing, right? And is it increasing morale, but it's also critical to securing our workplaces and our companies of the future. Because if you don't have anyone you can recruit to replace the people who are leaving, the organization and retiring, then you're not going to have a workforce. You're not going to have a company. And I don't think that that's necessarily something that every company is aware of. But we're coming in hot. There's a statistic that was like 27% of the workforce will be Gen Z by 2025. And I was at a conference recently, and one of the presenters was saying how Gen Z is like the most, what's the word? Like trendsetters. We're the trendsetters. So people always like are thinking and wanting to do and talk about whatever we say. I think also part of that is because of TikTok, which social media is a whole other kind of topic that we can dive into maybe if it comes up. But I did want to share a quick story as well, because from a different perspective, but similar point of view, where it's like, it's not only about, the organization, but it's also about the individual, right? It's about the person being able to, like the gendered example, right? The person being able to be an advocate for themselves, brush off certain things, just be themselves in their full self. I was working at a company that's an international, like global organization. It was a pretty small team, but I was the only one in the States. And we had a yearly, like an annual retreat. And I would go to Paris every 4 months. And there was one time in 2022 where I had a really bad flare up of PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. 1 in 8-ish women have it in the US. And I was feeling like my body couldn't make a trip. Travel's super hard on the body. I was very emotional. I was like depressed-ish. And I like just could not even think of going anywhere or doing any type of travel. And so I have a monthly check-in with my boss, or at the time I did. And it was essentially, our weekly check-ins were more about the day-to-day work. And the monthly check-ins were more about how can he empower me to work better, to live better, et cetera, et cetera. How can I make your life easier, basically? And that was, an hour-long meeting that was on both of our calendars every single month. This time, I showed up for the meeting, and I was admittedly a little bit nervous, but given the history and the trust that I had built with him, I was sort of confident that like this conversation was going to go smoothly. And I said, listen, I'm dealing with a personal matter, and I can't travel for at least a month. And he basically said to me, don't worry about it. Take care of yourself. If you need to take the rest of the week off, you can. We're not going to do our annual meeting until the following month, or until you can travel, because you're a really crucial part of the team and we want you to be there. And that sort of said it all. He didn't have any questions besides, how can I further help? He didn't have any problems moving the meeting, which was incredible. And it was largely because it was a small company. Most importantly, he cared. And it felt like, because he cared and because he was willing to make all these different changes, it was somewhere where I truly belonged.
Yeah, and I love the story, and I think, and I want to open this up. I'm just seeing the time. We want to make sure we include any questions and address anything, or just hear any shares that anyone wants. But it's such a beautiful place for us to open up, because what you just shared, and sort of what the connection you felt with him and his understanding, the end of the day, belonging is a feeling. Like, we can put words against it, and we can give you a textbook definition and a link to an HBR article and all of that. At the end of the day, we all know when we feel the biggest sense of belonging and where that is. And we know when we don't have it too. And Angela shared something in the chat, Danielle, while you were talking, that I want to highlight, because it is very much this reflection on society. And I'm paraphrasing here, but basically that it goes back to something you said early on, Danielle, which is, many people don't always feel like they belong, like as a child, whether in their families, communities, whatever it may be. And what Angela shared is, as a parent, she sees one of her, like, teaching belonging and sharing belonging as one of the key things she can do. And I just love that. And thank you, Angela, for being here and sharing that. And also, the reason that I highlighted it, Danielle, ties to what you put in the chat about inside out, right? What a shift. People who are parenting today, people who are creating, my whole background is media and Hollywood, people who are creating content today, right? Inside Out, or Turning Red, which was another Pixar movie about getting your period. I don't know that those would have been made, in the 80s when I was a kid, or in the 90s. My niece came home. I just got a manicure, but if I had done this this class like 6 hours ago, my nails would have still been green and yellow, or green and gold, because I went to visit my camp last week, and those were our camp colors. but my niece is there right now. And there were a lot of mean girls when I was a kid. And I was kind of like a loner. So I was definitely not part of the mean crew or the cool crew, but I also just did my own thing. So I was okay with that. But a lot of other kids had a hard time fitting in. My niece came home from camp. She's now 8.5. So she was 7.5 last year. And she was talking all about how they worked hard so that everyone felt included. It's part of what the camp is teaching them alongside gymnastics and soccer and cool arts and crafts projects. It is a core part of what the counselors were trained in last week when I went up to do some well-being training and I talked to them about connection and meaning and purpose. They spent a week on all of that, on making sure that all the girls felt included. And so when we talk about belonging, and it's why I see Gen Z leading the way, because I didn't grow up learning about this. Like when I discovered Brene Brown, when I was probably, 35, maybe 40, I was like, oh my God, I can't get enough. But kids today are growing up with a version of that. So it comes back to, and I would love to open up to questions, but it comes back to that friendship theme that we started with, because we all can learn from one another. Danielle and I are on parallel fields, right? Sometimes she is up here teaching me, sometimes there, but we always feel like it's this. And sorry for the sirens if you hear those. That's proof I am in New York. And can you hear them? They're really loud.
No, I can't.
Like 4 sirens. So sorry, I got a little distracted. But at any rate, so that going back to the theme of friendship and belonging, we all need to feel like we belong in places where we are. And we all have the opportunity to ensure that other people feel that feeling as well. And when we can come to a place or a space or just a relationship with one other person, right? A team is just a lot of relationships of a lot of different people all at once. When we can come and know that that is part of what we care about, just like we care about bottom line results or getting a deliverable done, that everyone has a clear place there, clear reason to be there, clear opportunity to shine. That is how we build belonging. And with that, Danielle, I don't know if you have any final thoughts before Q&A. If anyone has a question, please we're a small enough group. I am totally open. Just unmute yourself. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us. Feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. Does anyone have any questions or comments? I know we're close to time, but Danielle and I are happy to stay on for a few minutes if anyone has anything they'd like to add or ask.
I was just gonna say thank you for this subject matter and for the stories, and that really kind of brings life to that and gives some visual. I was thinking about with Francis in the hospital and how he created a sense of belonging for you as well. So it was kind of twofold. And then for Danielle, your manager, to really make you feel cared for and that you know that you are important and valued. I think these are really significant examples and a reminder for all of us that we don't know the invisible story behind the person, and to kind of keep that at the forefront, and especially in the workplace, unless someone's shared. And even when someone's shared, I don't think you can fully know because you maybe haven't walked in someone else's shoes to understand that. So thank you for the discussion. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing and also for the nodding. Like, so appreciate it. Thank you for being here. Mira, where in the world are you?
So I'm in California. I'm in Sausalito. I don't know. I'll you probably see that there's a Mount Tam in the water in the background.
Nice. I see the turquoise. It's a little blurry, but I could see
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Danielle and I both spent a lot of time in California.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful.
USC.
Let me know if you head out this way.
absolutely. Make sure connect to us so we have a way of staying
Yeah.
in touch.
I will do.
Anyone else have any thoughts? Anything you'd like to add? Angela, oh, you're in Australia. That is like my absolute favorite place in the world. I mean, I haven't been in a long time, but I have been twice and I love it. So thank you. Isn't it like the middle of the night for you? Or is it very early in the morning? Maybe it's like 7 a.m. Carolyn, it's nice to see you smile. Thank you for coming on video. Okay, well, I think Sylvia, no worries. All good. The tech issues are still real, even though we've all been Zooming nonstop for 4 years. So Hopefully we'll get to see your smile another time, Angela. Everyone loves the Gold Coast, and I thought it might be 7 a.m. Okay, Caitlin, thank you for the comment. I think I caught everyone's comments, but anyway, thank you all so much for being here. And Sylvia, I'll turn it back to you.
Oh yeah, and thank you so much, Sally and Danielle, for the conversation on belonging. I want to let everyone know that the recordings, actually for all of our summit, will be available on the Global Wellness Institute's YouTube channel. So keep an eye out for that. And appreciate all of you who showed up live, and for anyone that's tuning into the recording. So take care, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank
Bye.
you.